Jennifer from Flux. Welcome back to week 2 of the 2019 Flux Holiday Crochet Along. I am so excited that I announced this last week when we talked about the supplies, but we're making this really fun advent calendar. The Merry Little Advent Calendar is what we're calling it. And I've had the request to do an advent calendar for a long time, so I'm excited to kind of like bring it into our crochet along space and learn how to do it together. Now our project is going to have lots of parts to it. So last week we talked about the supplies and just how to kind of get started on the project. This week we're going to be tackling the base or the background, this square background that you see here. We're going to learn how to make the snowy ground, transition into the blue sky, and then finally we're going to add a red border along the edge of our base. So that's all we're going to be doing today. And later next week we'll be learning how to make the tree with these snow stripes on them. Very simple shapes and stitches that we'll be using. Week 4, the following week, we're going to be making some of the shapes. So we have a snowflake, a heart, circle, star, and square, and we're transforming them into this pictorial that you see here. The next week after that, we're going to be making this beautiful little drawstring bag that we'll put all of our shapes into to store, and as each day passes on the countdown to Christmas, you'll pull a shape out and button it on. When you're done with it for the season, you can put all the little shapes inside and put them in your storage bag. So at the end of our crochet along, we're going to learn how to assemble all this. So we're going to learn how to attach the tree, sew all the buttons onto here so we can pin them on. Now I'm just going to show you here. Our shapes are all made in the round. All of these are one round shapes. So these holes in the center, the center hole here, they just button right on each day, and then they unbutton at the end of the season after the holiday has passed. So we're going to learn how to sew all these buttons on. You can add some embellishments if you like, and we're just going to kind of put it all together. So that is what we're going to be doing for the whole crochet along, but today we're just going to focus, we're kind of breaking this down into bite-sized pieces. We're just going to be focusing on the base to get us started, to give us a nice foundation to build our beautiful scenery. So without further ado, let's get started. For today's tutorial, you're going to need a 6mm J crochet hook. This is my Furls Odyssey as a side note in case you're wondering. A tapestry needle, a pair of scissors, and you'll also need, now I didn't grab it, but you also need a ruler or tape measure to get the height and the width and everything. And then the yarn today, we're not using all the colors we talked about last week yet, but we are going to be using, now as a side note, this is Red Heart Super Saver. We did go over the supplies in more detail last week, so if you missed that video, click down below and you can see all the supplies you'll need in more detail. But we're going to be using Red Heart Super Saver, and today we're making the base like I explained before. So we're going to have like a snowy ground, a blue sky, and then we're going to put like a pretty festive edging all around our square. So we're going to begin with a snowy ground, and I'm just going to grab the yarn. This is the Aran, by the way, the blue and the cherry red. For the other colors in this project, check out the supplies video for the entire project. But just for today, we'll just need these 3 colors. So what we need to do, and I am going to kind of grab this blue and put it behind our work because we're making snow on a white table, so that's not going to work. So what we can do, I'm going to just kind of put this behind us. To make your base where everything will sit on, it's almost like our canvas. We're going to create a big rectangle today, okay? So what we need to do is put a slip knot on your hook. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop. Reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. Now, we're going to make a chain to establish width. There's no special stitch count. So if you want to make yours wider or like a mini size and make it narrower, just change your starting chain number. I'm going to be doing 36 chains, but you can kind of play around with it. There's no special stitch count on that. Okay, so what we want to do is do 36 chains. So wrap yarn around hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see better. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36. So here is our starting chain. Gives us a nice width. And if you're wondering about your dowel rod, some people like to have more overhang when they're hanging it. We're not going to do that till the last week. We're not going to attach it to our dowel rod, but you can almost get an idea of, if you haven't gotten yours yet, what you want to look for. Some people like it to come right up to the edge, so it's really a personal preference. So the next thing we're going to do is work row 1. So for row 1, we're going to work a half double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. This loop here does not count. So 1, 2, 3, that chain right there, we're going to work a half double crochet. So to make that, wrap yarn around hook, insert the hook into that chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops, okay? Now we're just going to simply do that all the way across. Very super easy. We're doing just kind of a plain background because we're going to have a lot of really neat things happening. So we just sort of need a blank canvas at this point. So just as a refresher, wrap yarn around hook, insert it in the chain, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops, okay? Just work your half double crochets all the way across. And you're just going to do this for the remainder of the row. Okay, so I'm going to continue to work my half double crochets and we'll rejoin in just a moment. Okay, just coming up to that last chain, we're just going to work a half double crochet in that very last chain. And now let's move on to row 2. Row 2 is just going to be the row you'll repeat for the rest of the entire rectangle. I will show you how to switch off to the blue, so we have our sky. But let's stick with the white for now. So we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and turn our work. Then you're going to work a half double crochet in that very first stitch and in every stitch across. Okay, so just keep working your half double crochet. Same thing, we're just working into the stitches this time and not the chains. So work your half double crochets in every stitch all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now also, and then we'll rejoin towards the end of the row. All right, just coming up to the end of row 2. I'm just going to work that also. Remember that chain 2 and turn. You're going to work that into that turning chain, the top chain of that turning chain as well, okay? So row 2 is complete. Now we have this little strip here. So what we want to do now is continue to repeat row 2 for about 3.5 inches. Okay, so I'm just working that last stitch, and like I mentioned before, you want to work this snowy section for about 3.5 inches. So we can just kind of double check that with our tape measure, and it's right around 3.5 inches, okay? So next we want to make the sky, okay? So you're just going to grab your scissors and cut the yarn and fasten off. Pull that through the loop, okay? And what we're going to do is grab our blue. Now you can really change up the colors. You don't have to use the exact colors I'm using, but we're going to kind of do a blue sky because our tree will be outside. You can make it inside and make it a wall color. It's totally up to you. Okay, so the last stitch that we worked where we tied off and fastened off, you're going to insert the hook into that last stitch worked and then take the yarn and bring it through the loop, okay? So just pull it through with your hook and then tie it right on. Now, you may have a preferred way of changing yarn. I like to just cut mine and just sort of tie it off, but you can do whatever you like, okay? So then what we're going to do is reinsert the hook back in where we tied it, bring up a loop, and chain 2. 1, 2. Now we're just going to simply repeat row 2. Same exact thing, we're just using a different color, okay? So what you're going to do is in that first stitch, work a half double crochet, work a half double crochet, and then just continue with row 2 over and over and over again. until you have the sky portion of your project established. So I'm going to continue working row 2 of my wintry sky here, and then we're going to rejoin, we're going to take some measurements, and then we're going to move on and add a festive, beautiful red edging all around, so it sort of frames in our little wintry scene for our advent calendar. Okay, so continue on with row 2 with the blue or your sky color, and we will rejoin in just a moment. Just working the last half double crochet of the row. And now our base or our canvas is finished. So let's cut the yarn, and then I'm going to show you the dimensions that I got. So just to fasten off, trim that yarn, wrap yarn around hook, and then pull it through. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is, let's zoom out here. We're going to put the border on, but I want to just show you the dimensions first. So we are looking at about 11 inches wide and 13 inches tall, okay, just to give you an idea where we're at here. So before we do the border, our red edging to kind of frame it in, let's weave these ends in first. Now, since we have 2 colors here, you'll want to, I have a blue tail here, for example, you'll want to weave the blue into the blue, and then when we go to this Aran, this cream color, you'll want to go into that section. Because if you try to go into, if I were to go into this cream color, the tail would just show right through, and you could see everything that I've done. So we're going to give it a little tug and then trim, and then just repeat for the other tails. I have one up here, I have some down here. So just weave in all your ends, and then we'll add our pretty edging next. Okay, so all of our ends are woven in, and I grabbed the red because we're going to frame it in some red. The first thing you'll want to do is make sure you are working it on the right side. Now, it's reversible, so it's up to you to choose. The biggest difference I can see is where you go from one color to another. It looks slightly different, but if you want to be nitpicky, but it's very similar looking. So pick the side that you would like to work, because our edging will give it a front side after this point. Okay, so grab your red. And then what you're going to do is get your hook, and you're going to tie the new yarn, that very last stitch that you worked, go into that last stitch, hook the new yarn on, and let me just zoom in so I'm not so far away. Hook the new yarn on and pull it through. So we're going to work our edging in single crochet stitches, but each corner will be 3 single crochet stitches, so we can kind of round off the corner there. Okay, so tie the new yarn right on there, and then you're going to reinsert your hook back into that stitch that you just tied it onto, and you're going to bring up a loop and chain 1. Okay, now in that same corner you're going to work 3 single crochets. So insert the hook into that corner, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through both loops. That's 1 single crochet, 2, and 3. Okay, just like that, and that'll give you a nice little corner. Now we're going to go down the side. We're going to go sort of counterclockwise around our square. Okay, so when you work in the sides, you're going to go into some of these spaces here that you see. The most important thing is to just keep them evenly spaced. Okay, it's not going to be as straightforward as when you have a row of stitches like up here, but you just want to make sure you go into these side holes, if you will, and just make sure they're evenly spaced, because that will make a big difference. So I'm just going to work single crochets all the way down the side of this rectangle, and just make sure you're consistently working into these side holes. Okay, you can count by working rows. So that's a row, and that's a row, and you can kind of do it that way. But really at the end of the day, it'll just really give it a nice crisp edge, okay? So I wouldn't get too hung up on where you're working them into, but just make sure you're at least keeping them evenly spaced. You don't want to come way down here and try to work a stitch. You want to just go to the next hole that you see in the side of your work here, okay? So I'm going to continue going down the side with my single crochet stitches. And then once we get to the corner, we'll rejoin just to give you a little refresher on how to work the corners again, okay? But as you can see, we have a nice little framed edge, okay? All right, so I came down the edge with my single crochets and now I'm at a corner. So once again, we're going to work, and it might be a little snug, but that's okay. We're gonna work 3 single crochets in the corner, just like we did before. So 1, 2, and 3. Now we're coming down to the bottom edge of our piece. So our piece is actually upside down right now. And we're just gonna work a single crochet in each stitch across. It'll be upside down, but it'll still look like an upside down stitch. So just work a single crochet in each stitch all along the bottom, and then you'll come back up and work 3 single crochets in the corner, same as we've been doing all the corners, and then back up to here, work that corner, and then across, okay? So keep working your single crochets and we'll rejoin in just a moment. Okay, so we've come all the way around our rectangle. And now I just have to work 1 last single crochet, and then we're just going to join, and let me zoom in so you can see, we're going to join with a slip stitch to close. So right in that chain 1 that we did at the beginning of the round, we're going to insert the hook, bring up a loop, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, and then we're just going to simply snip this off and then fasten off with your hook. And then what you can do is grab your tapestry needle, which mine seems to have run off, but you can flip it over to the back side. And this was one, I kind of held this along the edge as I worked, so weaved it in, or wove it in rather. So I'm going to snip that one. But this one here, we have to use our tapestry needle. So just thread that. And then just go in through the red areas to weave it in. Don't go into the blue area because it'll kind of stick out. And go in those back loops so it doesn't show from the front. And then you can trim with your scissors. And our base or canvas for our wintry scene is complete. So let me just zoom out now so you can see that. So now we have our area where we're going to be putting our scene. So last week we talked about the supplies, and I'm going to be sharing those links below, so if you missed any parts of it you can kind of catch up with us. But we shared all the supplies last week. This week we did our base, so we have a snowy ground, we have a sky, and we have this pretty red to kind of frame it all in. Next week we are going to be creating the tree, the center tree for our scene. Okay, so stay tuned next week and we will be creating the scene. Now before we go, I just wanted to mention that if you are on social media, to use the hashtag FiberFluxCal, and I'll put that above, to share your work on social media. It's really fun to see what everybody's doing. A lot of you like to really depart and do your own color palettes. And also, please consider joining our Ravelry group and Facebook groups, where it's a whole Fiberflux crochet along community. So often we'll have other crochet alongs going on at the same time as well. You can meet other makers, you can share your work, you can ask questions, and I'll put the links down below for that. So that's all for next week. This week, join us next week, and we're going to be creating the tree, the focal point of our crochet art advent calendar that we'll be making. So I will see you next week, and we will begin the next part. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiberflux video updates. Thanks again.